投球メカニクスの分析で世界的に知られるロブ・フリードマン氏が自身のポッドキャストピッチング忍者でドジャースの山本由伸投手を徹底的に分析しました。番組では山本投手がワールドシリーズの舞台で見せた常識外れともいえる連投を起点に、その裏側にあるトレーニング哲学や育成環境にまで踏み込んで議論を展開。そして山本投手の存在がメジャーのピッチング哲学そのものを揺さぶるかもしれないと指摘され、単なる一人の投手の特集にとどまらない示唆に富んだ内容となっています。日本語字幕付きでご紹介しますので、ぜひ最後までご覧ください。
Here with Masa Niwa and Alan Jaeger, and we're talking about the effect that Yoshinobu Yamamoto's success is going to have on all of MLB as well as potentially youth baseball. Alan, do you want to kick it off? Because we were talking and something you said really, kind of got me going too, about like what a watershed moment it could be, and how Yamamoto trains differently and how that might open some eyes in the United States.
It's funny, I hear you say differently, and for me it's more about normal in a way, which I know will sound funny, but no, I feel like that he represents everything, I should say, a lot of what we believe in, which is conditioning, which is building endurance, building robustness, the discipline of training. And the bottom line is this, I feel so strongly, and I've felt this way for 35 years, that like almost everything in life, everything needs a good base, a good foundation. In the training world, it always comes back to conditioning, durability, which leads to great recovery. And so I feel like Yamamoto is symbolic of that. He's someone that, and I think it's common in the Japanese culture, I think in the Dominican culture, they love to throw a lot too. And I think that the priority is on conditioning, training, durability, robustness. The rest takes care of itself.
Interesting, because I know that we've gone here back and forth between, back in the day, people would throw however much, like you would throw, people like back in the early days of baseball, people would throw like back-to-back games, throw a ton of innings. Then we started being very careful with folks, like from the youth level on up, pitch counts and everything. But we still haven't seen the injury rates really go down. I know that's an issue. And I know, Alan, you're a big believer in listening to your body and listening to your arm, but we've moved away from that. And then I was watching Yamamoto warm up before games, his long toss routine, his stretching, his, just like a bunch of yoga type techniques, the way he moves his body. And it seems like here we're all about like lifting more, throwing harder, throwing with large intent for velocity on almost every throw. It seemed different the way I was watching Yamamoto warm up. Masa, do you have any insight into anything about how Yamamoto developed?
Yeah, one thing, when he came to MLB 2 years ago, he doesn't do any strengths, no power lifting stuff, more like a focus on flexibility. It's different in Japanese baseball as well. It depends on player, depends on type of the body, different preparation will be fit. But a long toss, for sure, most Japanese pitcher, not only Japanese pitcher, but also like Ichiro, does that long toss too before the game or before the play catch. So yeah, maybe long toss kind of one kind of traditional way Japanese, not only pitcher, but also position player, doing that long toss.
Is there more of a focus, do you think, on listening to your body and like being more one with your body or feeling in touch with everything? Or is that just, I'm just making stuff up? Or is that just Yamamoto?
Yeah, Yamamoto is more like, okay, most of the pitcher want to see how the exactly ball the spin. Of course, maybe shoulder thing. So of course, how to train the shoulder out. Yeah, of course. But also they want to see how the ball spin. If you have a true back spin, you can see the ball is more like goes to further and So then if we more like a spin arcs, maybe it's a little bit off, maybe something going right, going left. So they want to make sure how the ball spin, just make sure how the going well.
So that's another benefit of long toss, obviously, Alan, as you well know, is that everything's exaggerated, right? Like if you're throwing long distances, you can see if the spin axis is off because you see the ball going in different areas. You're not going to hit your partner.
Well, yeah, number one, when you're long tossing, to Masa's point, not only seeing the spin, but also you're in what's called space, right? Your mind is free, your body is free, you're allowing your body to move naturally. Feedback obviously is massive, whether it's spin or not. Height, what's called proprioception, right? Adapting to your release point as you go up and as you go down. You can't replicate that inside somewhere into a net. And also, I was thinking when you were asking Masa that first question, long toss to me is also symbolic of this whole topic. When you long toss and you go out to 220, 230, 250, 280, 300 plus, well, what are you doing? You're allowing your body time and reps, right, to get into that conditioning. And obviously, you have to be in condition to do it. Versus you go out to 90 feet, 120 feet, you throw the ball on a line, there's not a lot of variability. It's a very short workout. And I think that's so long toss in a way, even though there's a load of other reasons we can talk about long toss, but ironically, or not so ironically, it's very symbolic of this topic today.
In Japanese culture, I know for years there had been like this American attitude that in like Koshin and stuff that look at all these pitch counts, look how many pitches these guys are throwing. And that's got to be terrible for you. I know in Japanese baseball, though, pitchers are pitching once a week at the MPB level, right? Like you're going once a week. So you have a little bit more rest in between, more throwing in between, and fewer injuries, despite the fact they've grown up with probably more throwing. And then you see Yamamoto come in and not only willing to throw in the 18-inning game after he started, then pitching in game 6, throwing 96 pitches and coming back the next day on no days rest. How much of that prepares you for that? Like how much of it, you think about running a marathon, you don't run a marathon. You don't just wake up one day and decide to run a marathon or you're going to get hurt. You build up to it. It's a lifetime thing. You think of the marathon runners that are great. They've run marathons their whole life. They're running from city to city, stuff like that. And it becomes natural to them. And there's not the injuries that you would think because your body has adapted to it and gotten used to it, and that's what you do. Is that unique to Yamamoto, or is that something that as a society we've kind of developed here that we are not letting pitchers develop in that way?
Yeah, well, I mean, you nailed it, Rob. I mean, the bottom line is before there was so much emphasis on protecting the arm, pitch counts, workload management, right? All these terms we hear all the time. You went out and threw according to what your arm wanted to do. And if you have a strong arm, you tend to want to throw. Or if you love playing baseball or softball, or football or whatever sport, you love to do it. Our arms, by the way, are incredibly resilient if trained and treated well. So to your question, Rob, is like this is just part of I think what happens organically, what happens naturally. And we want to train, we want to condition. That's why we want to break the 4-minute mile, right? Whatever the marathon 2 hours and whatever it is, people want to get better at it. So we want to train and condition. And then whether it was in the 70s, 80s, 90s, whenever things started happening with pitch counts, and then more recently with workload management, we've now artificially, in my opinion, put these constraints, as to your point, to protect the arm. And I have a saying, which is what we're doing is we're protecting it from its greatest health, endurance, conditioning, arm strength, etc. So in a nutshell, I would just say that we need to go back to our roots. We need to trust nature. We need to trust our bodies. We need to allow the athletes to train and condition. Last night I looked up the amount of complete games over the last 100 years, and as recently even into the 70s, into the 80s, or maybe right around 80. And I know it was a 4-man pitching staff. You had guys throwing CGs like Ferguson Jenkins, Bob Gibson, 28, 29, 30. A year. So to me, this is almost as simple as it gets. If we don't, and that's why I love what Yamamoto's doing. I believe he's bringing an awareness to what's already natural, which is conditioning. The better conditioned we are, the more we can do. And it's almost like because we're protecting the athlete, or of course we're doing the opposite. We're putting them in a greater position to break down. Because to your point, do you want to build up a marathon runner so they can sprint all day or whatever? Or do you want to work on only sprinting, and then one day let's shock them and have them go 100 pitches in a game?
What's been the feedback to that in Japan, though? Like, is the attitude in Koshin about how many innings people throw and how many pitches they throw? Are they saying this is great? Like, look at these high school kids, they're amazing. Or are they trying to cut back on that and thinking that that is like abusive?
Yeah, first of all, when we are kids, okay, it's good or bad, I'm not sure, but once we start playing baseball, it's like all season long. Doesn't matter winter or maybe spring, or spring, of course, playing baseball anyway. When in the US, okay, during the summertime, spring and summer, kids playing baseball, and fall and the winter, basketball or football, soccer, so different sports, right? So when we start playing baseball, just playing baseball all year long, that was maybe one of the things, kind of playing catch, playing baseball all year long, that maybe help your body maybe. And but one coaching is a totally different story. As Aaron can mention about the coaching mentality, it was really crazy actually. Like sometimes you have a pitch like 800 pitches or like 900 pitches or one tournament. In the past, like you have to like dice like a pitch 4 straight days, something like that, and every day complete the game. So that's not there anymore. But still, every weekend, if you can prospect, you have to pitch Saturday and Sunday, and then you have to build up. But once you become a pro, just only once a week, and you try to complete the game, finish the game. Yeah, that's another kind of aspect to help pitcher.
How is the throwing between starts? Like, what do they do between starts? Is there a bullpen day or several?
Yeah,
bullpen
maybe twice.
Mm-hmm.
Twice, maybe bullpen day, but I'm not sure how many. But yeah, same as here, but 30, 35 pitches. But like Kenta Maeda pitch only like 15, the bullpen session. So yeah, of course, maybe depend. But once a week and 100, maybe up to 20 pitches. So the 4 days rest here up to 100.
And then typically long toss in between and other.
Yeah, that's always do.
Yeah.
I mean, as I said, not only spin things, more like just how the body works well. Just make sure. Yeah, if there's something wrong, okay, some shoulder issue, elbow issue. Yeah.
Did you have any feedback on that, Alan?
What little I've seen with Japanese pitchers, it just seems like they love to throw. It doesn't mean they're throwing with high intent. It doesn't mean they're throwing to look at the Rapsodo for the day. They like to throw. I'll never forget, I was at UCLA and I watched Kaz Matsui come out around 10 a.m., who was a position player, to Moss's point, not a pitcher. It might have been an hour before he even got to his throwing, and then it was forever. And it wasn't like he had to go 300 feet, but he just, a lot of arc, a lot of stretching, probably to see the rotation on the ball. It just seemed like a walk in the park. It was just part of the day. He might have been, I have no idea. It could have been 20 minutes, could have been 30 minutes. It just seemed like that's the mentality. And again, I just keep coming back to this theme that the focus is on conditioning and being in tune with the body. And there's no one standing around with a pitch counter or a counter of how many throws you're making. It's all feel. And I feel like because we're trusting the feel and the natural part of this, the body wants to do more. And when the body wants to do more in a healthy way, it's going to build up endurance, and then it's going to recover better, so then it can do more again the next day. And I think that's what we call a positive cycle. And I feel like what we've done is we've put the pitchers into a negative cycle because of something you said earlier. We're just in this protect workload management world. And so I can't comment like Masa can. I can only tell you from my experience, it just feels like, I always think of the Japanese culture and I think of the Dominican culture. They don't have artificial measurements per se, or they don't have, let's say, data on throwing. And I feel like they just, and also Masa made a good point. I'm not saying you have to throw year round, but if you throw year round or you throw in a way that's comfortable and you maybe deload and you're not always pitching in games, there's something to be said about staying in shape, or your arm staying in shape. I'm not saying a 12-year-old necessarily needs to throw year round, but there's something to be said about, Randy Sullivan has one of the greatest lines, the body is made to move. It wants to move. So anyway, not sure how much that helped with my Japanese background, but anyway.
Well, I do think there's the thing that I'm seeing in it is that we like to measure stuff, right? Like baseball is all about measuring stuff. Our society is all about measuring stuff. Like we want to hit these metrics. You want to walk by this age. You want to do this by this age. We're going to measure how fast you can do this. We don't have a lot of patience for things we can't measure, which is, I think, it gives a mental game short shrift, but it also gives things like we're talking about listening to. How do you measure listening to your body, right? Like you can't really measure it. So since you can't measure it, we don't value it as much.
This world is about individuality, right? We have to adapt to the individual. Some may want to throw for an hour, some may want to throw for 5 minutes on a given day. But that's what, to me, were measurements. I understand, of course, I understand the concept behind data and analytics and all this stuff. Try to measure or define love.
Right.
We could write 1 million books for 1 million years about what it means to feel love, and we're not going to get close. That, to me, is symbolic of this discussion. Every athlete has their own innate movement patterns. They have their own innate feel for what works for them, conditioning wise, right? Why do some guys like to throw for an hour? Whatever. Why can some guys throw BP forever and some guys can't? So we have to get back to this individuality piece, because we cannot measure. We can spend all day long getting the analytics and data on workload management, and that can hurt somebody because we think we know it's better for them. We have to empower the athlete. We have to do a 4-hour, eval on them with questions so that we know them, like the back of our hand. And then even then, we have to trust the process and trust, especially if they come from somewhere, a culture or a college program where they got into unbelievable throwing shape or conditioning to where they roll out of bed and that's what they do. So sorry for the tangent, but we have to get back to the individuality. You're right. We love numbers. We love to project. We love to know. We love knowables. But my point is that we have to start tapping into the unknowables or the trusting of the individual.
Well, in Japan, actually, pro game, games are like 6 in Japan. So players usually show up like noon, 1, and actually start a pitcher. Start actually conditioning, not only play catch, maybe run, short run, or maybe shuttle run, whatever. It takes a couple hours actually. So a couple American players come from US and work out that way. More like practice is more important in Japan, but it sometimes help conditioning. So, but in the US, in the MLB, players come like 3-4 o'clock and come out for shag, and of course pretty much play catch. So, but if you play 6 months, 7 months, I don't know which is better. Maybe it depends on players though. Always they argue, which is better? Well, a lot of Japanese player complain that's a workout practice too long.
So there's less. They spend more time at the park warming up, and it's almost like the whole day's there versus just coming in and that's what we're going to do. We're just going to throw. We're going to get warm up, and get ready to play.
Also, spring training. During the spring training, workout from like 9 to 6. So in the MLB, probably 9 to 11. And play golf afternoon.
That's a good point. There is a big difference in that. I know pitchers love their golf, but there is something to be said about maybe throwing a little bit more and stuff. And you see, like we're compressing everything into such a tight range that we're so, does that in itself put more stress on you? You know what you're like. If you have to do something real quick and you have to get it done real quick, there is more stress on you. Watching, like I spent all day at the stadium watching Yamamoto throw and watching kind of everybody throw in the outfield. And you see the different techniques. Everybody was pretty different, but Yamamoto's very relaxing watching him throw and chilling out with Yada-san in the background going, just giving him some suggestions. I can sit there all day just watching this dude chill. It wasn't any hurry to do anything. And with that, you watch the general movements, it's much different from the way we train here. Like not lifting weights. Weights are very intense. You're doing maxing out on stuff. he's doing all these stretches, standing on his head, bending over backwards, doing things that normal like I couldn't do. I'd break in half. But maybe I can't do it because I never grew up trying to do it. And maybe it isn't something that was ever encouraged with me. It's very eye-opening, the difference in training. And when you see it and when you watch it in action, it just jumps out to you.
Actually, it's kind of funny. Yamamoto said after I pitched the game 7, World Series, he said, I didn't know I can do this.
Yeah, right.
So it was like yeah. Well, of course, it's first time for him too. That kind of, 0 days less already. But yeah, he kind of broke finally he did it. And then he finally find out, okay, I have a different level. So
By the way, Yamamoto, he may have been surprised the next day, but I guarantee you in his gut of guts, in his heart, it didn't surprise him that much because of how well he's trained. And that again is a massive piece of today, is that if you condition yourself the right way, you can do things like that.
yeah, actually Yamamoto said after he drafted from high school out of high school, and then at the minor league, one day he pitched like 5 innings, 6 innings, 100 pitches, and next 5 days he couldn't do anything. So, and then now, okay, after he pitched, next day feel like, okay, I can pitch. That was a huge difference. 5-6 years. It took 5-6 years to get that level, but he feel, okay, now I can do that. So yeah, of course, 5-6 years he prepared for that kind of moment. So yeah, that's a huge difference.
He probably inspired a lot of other pitchers here. And I think that this is why we're digging into this, because there's a lot of interest into what Yamamoto has done. And I'm seeing it open up a lot of eyes, and maybe it'll change the way people throw.
最後までご覧いただきありがとうございました。今回の動画についてどういう感想を持たれましたか？ぜひコメント欄で意見や感想をお聞かせください。チャンネル登録やグッドボタンを押していただけると励みになります。それでは次回の動画でお会いしましょう。